I woke up from a car accident and decided to pretend I had lost my memory. That lie changed everything. When I opened my eyes in the hospital room, my first thought was to play a small joke. I wanted to see the shocked faces of my best friend Zoe and my childhood sweetheart Xavier. I almost laughed when I saw them standing beside my bed, looking nervous. But then Zoe suddenly hooked her arm through Xavier's. "I'm your best friend," she said calmly, "and he's my boyfriend." Xavier didn't deny it. Before I could say anything, strange words appeared in the air in front of me, like comments from a live broadcast. "The side character is so stupid. The heroine and the male lead are perfect together. If she doesn't pretend to lose her memory, how can the heroine get her chance?" I froze. The side character they were talking about was me. The heroine was Zoe, the girl who was holding my boyfriend's arm. Xavier tucked the blanket around me and told me to rest. Then he and Zoe left the room together, still linked arm in arm. Something felt wrong. I followed them quietly into the hallway. There, I saw him touch her hair and lean close to her. They spoke in low voices, full of intimacy. Zoe teased him, asking if he was afraid I would remember everything. Xavier said I loved him too much to leave him, but that Zoe had been waiting for him for a long time. My chest tightened. More comments appeared in front of my eyes. "She's so clueless. The good girl act is useless now." I stood there, unable to move. When they noticed me, Zoe smiled naturally and said, "Don't mind us. We're just being close." As if it were normal. I forced myself to say, "It's fine. Go on." The moment I turned away, tears poured down my face. I had loved Xavier for 10 years. I trusted Zoe more than anyone. Back in my hospital bed, I cried silently into the pillow. An hour later, Xavier came back and asked if I wanted food. Zoe stood beside him. I suddenly asked, "You said you're my best friend. Then, do I have a boyfriend?" Xavier answered quickly, "Yes. His name is Kyle." Kyle was his own best friend, the school troublemaker with blonde hair. The floating comments mocked me for still asking questions. My heart sank. Just then, a voice came from the door. "Who says I didn't come?" Kyle stood there holding a fruit basket. Zoe told him I had lost my memory and needed company. Later, Kyle took me to an apartment and said I used to live there. I looked at the new items inside and felt bitter. That night, I heard Xavier talking to Kyle in the living room. Xavier asked him to pretend to be my boyfriend, so I wouldn't get close to other men while I had amnesia. Kyle didn't refuse. I lay under the covers and remembered my past. I had studied desperately just to get into the same university as Xavier. I confessed to him on the day we were accepted. He had smiled and said yes. I helped him with everything in college, thinking I was lucky. I didn't know when Zoe started copying my clothes, my perfume, and always finding excuses to meet Xavier. 10 years of love and 1 year of dating meant nothing compared to her sweet smile. When Kyle came to check on me, I told him I wanted to move back to the dorms. He nodded and didn't argue. A few days later, it was Zoe's birthday. Xavier rented out an entire restaurant. There was a tall cake, champagne, and flowers everywhere. He had never done this for me. Watching him prepare such a perfect party for her felt like a knife in my chest. Zoe made a wish and kissed Xavier's cheek in front of everyone. Then she came over and grabbed my arm. "Can you take pictures for us?" she asked sweetly. I held the phone with shaking hands. Once, Zoe had taken pictures for Xavier and me and said she envied us. I had comforted her, never knowing she wanted him for herself. "Tara, hurry up," Zoe urged. My vision blurred with tears. Just as I was about to press the button, Kyle suddenly reached over, took the phone from my hand, and tossed it back to her. "Why are you acting like a photographer?" he said coldly. The room went quiet. I stood there stunned, while the comments in the air laughed and predicted I would suffer again. I poured myself several glasses of wine at the party, trying to numb the ache in my chest. My head felt light, but my heart felt unbearably heavy. I stepped out onto the balcony for air and accidentally heard Xavier's voice mixed with the laughter of his friends. "Man, Xavier," one of them said, "Tara liked you for 10 years. Why did you only date her for 1 year, but got together with Zoe so fast?" Xavier let out a lazy laugh. "She was always following me around anyway. Why wouldn't I take what was already there? Everyone knew Tara was crazy about me. Zoe isn't the type to wait that long." Another guy teased, "Then why did you even agree to date Tara last year?" Xavier didn't hesitate. "She suddenly got a chance to study abroad. If I didn't say yes, she would have left. I wasn't about to lose someone who worshipped me that easily. Once I agreed to date her, she stayed. Simple." The group burst into laughter. "So, did you and Zoe really sleep together?" someone asked. "Of course," Xavier answered casually, even sounding proud. "What else would we be doing?" Every word felt like a blade cutting into my heart. The memories I treated as precious were nothing more than jokes to him. While I was dreaming about our future, he was sharing himself with my best friend. I covered my mouth and cried silently. The floating comments appeared again, laughing at me, saying this was what a side character deserved. I turned to leave but crashed into a waiter carrying cake. I apologized in a panic and tried to escape before Xavier could see my red eyes. But when I rounded the corner, I slammed straight into Kyle's chest. Before I could react, he pulled me into his arms. Xavier rushed over, staring at us in shock. "What the hell are you doing?" Kyle answered calmly, "Isn't it obvious? I'm with my girlfriend." I hid behind Kyle, gripping his shirt tightly. Kyle looked down at me and asked in a low voice, "Did he scare you?" I hesitated, then nodded. "You scared my girlfriend," Kyle said to Xavier. Xavier looked like he'd just heard the biggest joke of his life. He stepped forward, trying to see my face, but Kyle didn't move. The guys hurried over and dragged Xavier back, telling him to calm down. Kyle didn't look at anyone else. He wrapped an arm around me and walked me down the quiet hallway. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Zoe standing in the shadows, crushing a cigarette pack in her hand. When we were finally alone, the tears I'd been holding back poured out. Kyle handed me tissues without asking a single question. His silence felt strangely comforting. When we reached the dorm, someone shouted from a window, shocked to see the school troublemaker walking me home. I ran inside without even saying goodbye. The next day, Zoe waited for me in the stairwell. "So Kyle walked you home?" she asked coldly. "I guess you're really dating him now." She shoved a stack of photos into my hands. They were all pictures of Xavier and me from the past, studying together in the library, standing under cherry blossoms, smiling on the Ferris wheel. "Since you lost your memory," Zoe said softly, "I figured you'd want to know the truth. Xavier is actually your real boyfriend. The one you loved for 10 years. She leaned closer, watching my face. "But he stopped loving you a long time ago. After your accident, he just went along with it and stayed with me. He didn't want to you." I flipped through the photos calmly and dropped them into the trash. "Is there anything wrong with my life now?" I said lightly. "Kyle treats me better than Xavier ever did." Zoe froze. "That's it. You're not sad. Not angry. You loved him so much." I let out a small breath. "Oops. You figured it out." "I never lost my memory." Her eyes widened. "You lied to us. Tara, you're so manipulative." I laughed bitterly. "Compared to what you and Xavier did, my little act is nothing. Go tell him if you want." She threatened that Xavier would hate me if he knew I was pretending. I looked at her calmly. "I don't care what he thinks anymore. In my world, I'm the main character now." That night, I packed up everything Xavier had ever given me. At the bottom of the box were old photos with his handwriting on the back. "The rest of my life belongs to you." I tore them into pieces and threw them away. I didn't cry. From that moment on, the Tara who loved Xavier was gone. The next day, Zoe invited everyone over for a board game night, and made a point of telling me to come. I knew she was waiting for a chance to expose me in front of everyone, but I agreed anyway. When Kyle and I arrived, Zoe was leaning against Xavier's shoulder like she owned him. The room went strangely quiet when people saw us walk in together. Zoe stood up and smiled sweetly at me. "Tara, are you feeling better? Kyle has been taking such good care of you, hasn't he?" Her eyes flicked between us. Sharp and uneasy. I suddenly realized she was afraid that if everything came out, Xavier might turn back to me. Someone quickly shuffled the cards to break the tension, and the game began. During the game, Zoe fed Xavier a strawberry and kissed his cheek. He bit it and fed the rest back to her, smiling naturally. Someone joked that they were here to play games, not to show off. Zoe glanced at me with quiet triumph. I lost my focus and ended up drawing a punishment card, "Kiss someone here for 10 seconds. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at me. Xavier's smile disappeared. "If you're embarrassed," he said quickly, "you can pick a girl." Zoe leaned closer with a fake laugh. "I don't mind." I could see what she wanted me to look small and ridiculous. My eyes moved to Kyle, who had been sitting quietly the whole time like an outsider. "I'll choose my boyfriend," I said. I walked over, wrapped my arms around his neck, closed my eyes, and kissed him. Gasps and whistles filled the room. I counted in my head, waiting for the 10 seconds to pass, but just as I was about to pull away, Kyle suddenly held the back of my head and deepened the kiss. My mind went blank. When he finally let go, I was breathless and dizzy. The room was completely silent. Xavier's face turned dark. Kyle calmly flicked the punishment card with his finger. 10 seconds are up. Still playing. Zoe forced a laugh and said I was surprisingly good at kissing for someone who had lost her memory. Xavier stood up and grabbed Kyle's wrist. "Come with me." Their argument spilled into the hallway. Xavier accused Kyle of crossing the line. Kyle said he was only acting as my boyfriend. Xavier shouted that I was still his girlfriend, and that Kyle needed to know his place. Kyle told him he might as well stay with Zoe since they suited each other. Xavier said his feelings for me weren't something he could just erase. Kyle laughed and said that maybe Xavier should learn some boundaries. The tension snapped and Xavier punched him. I ran out just in time to see them fighting. Zoe followed, screaming. Kyle had a bruise on the corner of his mouth, and for some reason, that hurt me more than anything Xavier had done. I whispered to Kyle that fighting someone like Xavier wasn't worth it. He laughed and said, "So you're done pretending too?" Before I could answer, Zoe suddenly shouted that I had never lost my memory at all. Xavier stared at me like he had been struck. I looked at him calmly and said yes, I remembered everything. He rushed to explain, saying he had no real feelings for Zoe. Zoe screamed that he was the one who seduced her. They started accusing each other, and the floating comments appeared again, shocked that the so-called hero and heroine were breaking apart. I watched them and felt nothing but exhaustion. Xavier tried to grab my hand, saying we should calm down. Kyle stepped between us. Xavier shouted that Kyle had no right to interfere. Kyle replied that Xavier had brought this on himself. Xavier insisted that I would come back to him if he just tried hard enough. I finally pulled my hand free and said, "Xavier, you're dirty." The words seemed to drain the color from his face. Kyle asked if I wanted to leave. I nodded and followed him without looking back. Behind us, Xavier shouted my name in despair. On the way out, my mind was full of questions. When did Kyle know I was pretending? Why did he agree to help Xavier? Why did he suddenly stop pretending? The floating comments teased that Kyle had secretly liked me for a long time. I didn't know whether to believe them, but I found myself wanting to. I turned to him and asked when he figured out I hadn't really lost my memory. He said it was the first day in the hospital. He overheard the nurse say I was crying under the covers. Xavier and Zoe thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. Kyle suddenly pulled me close and kissed me again, this time slow and deliberate. "Tara," he said, "I don't like seeing you sad over Xavier. If I see it again, I won't hold back." I teased him, asking if that meant he liked me. His ears turned red, and he didn't deny it. He took my hand and intertwined our fingers. For the first time since the accident, I felt like I was walking toward something new instead of running from something broken. After that, Zoe tried to get attention by hurting herself, and was taken to the hospital. I heard about it from others but felt nothing. She had stopped being my best friend a long time ago. My world slowly became filled with Kyle. He remembered my preferences, showed up with hot milk tea in the rain, saved me a sunny seat in the library, and sent me research materials when I struggled with my thesis. One day, I found out he saved my contact name in his phone as mine. That simple word made my heart ache in a way I couldn't explain. When winter break came, I went home and unexpectedly found Xavier sitting in my living room with my parents. He told them I was seeing a bad student. My mother tried to defend him, saying he only cared about me. I looked at Xavier and said calmly, "I know what's good and what's bad." He pulled me outside and said I was only dating Kyle to make him jealous. He even offered to travel with me as an apology. I shook my head and said I was busy knitting a scarf for Kyle. Xavier left without eating. He came again on New Year's, holding an expensive gift bag and asking where his gift was. I asked him what right he had to ask. He grabbed my wrist and said he and Zoe had already broken up, and that he wanted to start over with me. He even said he wanted to marry me. I looked at him and felt nothing. I told him that liking someone meant respect, and he had none. I reminded him that on the day of my accident, I was going to pick up his birthday gift. I told him how much he had hurt me when he kissed Zoe in front of me and pushed me toward another man. With every word, his face grew paler. In the end, I deleted his contact information in front of him, and thanked him for introducing me to Kyle. He stood there crying as I walked away. Kyle was waiting across the street. When I got into the car, he held my hand and joked that my ex-husband was finally gone. I kissed his throat to shut him up. Later that day, I received a huge transfer from his mother with a message saying she was paying a deposit, so I wouldn't run away with her son. After graduation, Kyle became successful in tech, and I became a teacher. Zoe fell apart. Xavier never dated again. None of it mattered to me anymore. One weekend after we were married, I found a thick photo album in Kyle's study. Every page was filled with pictures of me from college. He admitted he had liked me since freshman year but stayed silent because my eyes were only on Xavier. He said it was love at first sight, and that now he had finally gotten what he wished for. Sunlight poured through the window, and I told him to put the album in the living room where everyone could see it. He laughed and kissed me, saying I could forget about running away in this lifetime. In that moment, I knew the floating comments were wrong about one thing. I was never a side character. I was the main character of my own story, and this ending belonged to me. After that night, Kyle stopped pretending to be anyone's replacement and stayed openly by my side. The way he cared for me felt natural, like he had always been there. When it rained, he showed up outside my classroom soaked through, protecting a cup of hot milk tea in his arms. When I felt down, he didn't ask questions. He just hugged me and muttered that I looked worse when I frowned. I once mentioned that the sunlight was nice at a window seat in the library, and the next day he went early to save it for me. When I struggled with my thesis, he called me stupid, but that same night I received a package of neatly organized reference materials from him. One day, I discovered he had saved my contact name as mine. That single word warmed my heart more than any promise. I heard bits and pieces about Zoe and Xavier later. Zoe tried to hurt herself to get attention after Xavier kept rejecting her. Xavier applied to work at Kyle's company but quit when he realized he would be under Kyle's leadership. People said he never dated again and still talked about me as the love he lost. None of it mattered to me anymore. During winter break, I went home and unexpectedly found Xavier sitting with my parents. He said he was worried I was being influenced by a bad student. I told him calmly that I knew what was right for me. He pulled me aside and said I was only dating Kyle to make him jealous and asked me to travel with him as an apology. I shook my head and said I was busy knitting a scarf for Kyle. He left without eating. On New Year's Day, he came again with an expensive gift and asked where his present was. I asked him what right he had to ask. He grabbed my wrist and said he and Zoe had broken up and wanted to start over with me. He even said I was the only person he wanted to marry. I felt nothing. I told him that liking someone meant respect, and he had never respected me. I reminded him that the day of my accident, I had gone out to pick up a birthday gift for him, and that he had pushed me toward another man while kissing Zoe in front of me. With every word, his face turned pale. In the end, I deleted his contact information in front of him, and thanked him for introducing me to Kyle. He stood there crying while I walked away. Kyle was waiting across the street. When I got into the car, he took my hand and joked that my ex was finally gone. That same day, I received a large transfer from his mother with a message saying she was paying a deposit so I wouldn't run away with her son. After graduation, Kyle became successful in tech and I became a teacher. The past slowly faded into something distant. One weekend after we were married, I found a thick photo album in Kyle's study. Every page was filled with pictures of me from college. He admitted he had liked me since freshman year but stayed silent because my eyes had only followed Xavier. He said it was love at first sight, and that being with me now was what he had always wished for. Sunlight filled the room as he held me close. I finally understood that I had never been a side character. I only became one when I forgot my own value. The moment I chose myself, everything changed. This was not someone else's story anymore. It was mine.